Welcome to the Alignment Show, where we talk with people who've made bold moves to live in line with what matters most to them. Life's too short to spend it on things that don't fit. And if you're feeling that pull to realign, you're in the right place. These conversations are here to inspire and support you on your own path. Let's meet today's guest. And a good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome once again to the Alignment Show. Looking a little bit different this week as we move to a new format. I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But if you notice that things look a little different, I don't have quite as good a green screen as I usually do. I don't talk about it a lot on the show. But I do have a severely disabled daughter, and I am needing to be in her room as I'm recording this, so I don't have my usual green screen. But the show must go on, and so we are moving ahead. We are very glad this week to have a special guest. All of my guests are special one way or another, but I think this one is an outstanding interview. And so I'll be introducing you to Andrea Waltz here in just a moment. But before we get started, I want to recognize our sponsors. They help keep the program going. For instance, Val Roskin's Teas. I think I'm saying her name right. Known Val for a while, but I always struggle with her last name a little bit. But she sponsors this episode that is spelled T-E-W-S, but I think it's pronounced like Teas. The important thing to know is that Val is a content strategy writer who helps authors and coaches get past the stress and overwhelm of figuring out what to post on LinkedIn specifically. She offers what she calls stress-free content creation. Think of it as transformative content support that helps you build a community of readers, potential clients, and even business friends. Val's whole approach is about helping people share their message with less stress and more joy, one conversation and one piece of content at a time. She really believes in the power of connecting, commenting, and creating because when you do all three, you open the door to more trust, visibility, and opportunity. You can find out more about Val and her work at donking.com. That's DONNKING.com/butterfly. And it's butterfly because her company is Butterfly Copywriting. This episode is also brought to you by my books. I've got another one that will be coming out in about a month, actually. We've had to push back publication at least once, but I think we're going to get it out this time. The name of the book is Creating While Caring. I have two other books that are out in the Sparklight Chronicles and two more that are in process. So there's a lot there. The Sparklight Chronicles are business parables. Creating While Caring is straight nonfiction. I think you'll find something that will be useful to you in helping you live your values and value your life, regardless of where you are. You can find out more at donking.com. That's Don with a double N, DONNKING.com/books. Be sure and keep track of the show notes. You can find those at thealignmentshow.com. We have had a change of URL, so it's taken a little bit to shake that out. I'm trying to get the word out to folks that it is now thealignmentshow.com. And we are changing our format. It's not just my introduction, which I would normally not do from my daughter's room. We are moving to all recorded. We have, for over 90 episodes, been doing this live, and we still do minimal editing because I just like the feel of live conversation. But I have figured out that most people are watching the show or they're listening to the audio-only version in replays. And so we're just going to do it a little different way, and you'll find out more information about that on this show's show notes. So you'll be able to get those show notes at donking.com/93. That's the episode number for this one, and we'll talk more about that. But for now, I just want to get you started hearing the wisdom and the growth of Andrea Waltz. Now, a lot of you are going to already know Andrea, or at least know of her. She is the co-author of the best-selling book, Go for No, which has been a cornerstone in sales training around the world for 25 years. Along with her husband, Richard Fenton, she's helped literally millions reframe rejection and failure as essential steps toward success. Andrea is a sought after speaker, a champion of mindset shifts, and a firm believer that what you want lies on the other side of no. We're going to get to know her more. In fact, even if you have read her stuff, I think you're going to learn some interesting and surprising things about Andrea. So, without further delay, let me turn it over to my virtual self. I guess we're both recorded. We're just recorded at different times. And we'll let me interview Andrea. Don? And thank you for that introduction, Don. As I no doubt said, we're glad to have Andrea Waltz with us. And she's got a new book out. It's been out for a little bit. But there's a lot of stuff that I want to talk with Andrea about how they got started and doing what they're doing, what they continue to do. A little bit of a setup here, Andrea, to remind you, I know you've seen episodes of the show. A lot of the folks that come on the alignment show are people who weren't doing what they wanted to do. And when the pandemic made them realize life is too short to spend it doing what you don't want to do, they made a change. In a way, I think you and Richard have done the same thing for a career, but within that career, there's been a tremendous number of streams, I would say.
Yes.
And so I think what we want to start out with, first of all, remind me, Go for No, the original book, which is one of the most influential books in sales. I think it came out, is it 25 years ago?
That's correct. Yeah, we wrote that book in 2000. We launched our business in 1997, 98, and wrote that book in 2000 as we knew that as speakers and trainers, we knew that that would be the way to open the door to get those people to take a look at our material. So we used that short book to get business. It was kind of like a business card.
Yeah, and a lot of people will use books that way, but I get the feeling that the book went way beyond being a fancy business card. I mean, did it surprise you how it has had an influence on sales and business all these years?
Well, obviously, it's had a fantastic run. And obviously, we're really, really pleased about that and never could have anticipated that it would last this long and that it would become something that has kind of taken on a life of its own. I sometimes hear people use the phrase "go for no." I might see it on social media or something, and I'll ask the person, "Hey, have you read the book?" And they'll say no. In fact, some people don't even know that there is a book. So the idea that we've created this little catchphrase is pretty cool, actually, when it really did start as a tool for us to get speaking engagements and training sessions and things like that. But it didn't start off successful in any way. I have to tell you, the first 5 years of marketing the book were a painstaking would be a nice way of putting it. I mean, a slog, a depressing slog where we heard no. In fact, I tell this story sometimes. The first thing that we did after we published that book was we sent out 500 copies to influencers, vice president of sales, people that we thought would want to buy the book in bulk for their teams. And so we sent out these 500 copies and we expected to get orders, 10 copies, 50 copies, 100 copies. Nothing, crickets. We actually thought maybe the post office had just dumped all of the books in the garbage can and nobody got one. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case because we did end up getting one order. So we were pretty confident they were delivered. We actually got one letter from a company saying, no, absolutely not. We'll never share this with our field. We disagree with this approach. It's really funny. So we got some pushback. But after that horrible start, it was really difficult for us to get a foothold, and so we struggled. And I have to tell you, we wanted to give up so many times. The Go for No people wanted to give up on Go for No many times.
Well, and it makes sense. I mean, it's, how should I put it? It's a great philosophy. It's not easy to apply, and so you kind of became your own best example in a way. Um, and this is not primarily a show for writers, but we have a lot of writers that come on the show just by the nature of examining your values and what's important to you. And so uh, I do ask some writerly questions, like for instance, in 2000, when you guys published it, that was before the Kindle. That was before the explosion of independent publishing. Did you guys publish it yourself, or did it go through a major publisher? I can't remember.
Yeah, so we published it ourselves. In fact, Richard found a little book at the bookstore, and it was how to self-publish, and it was a short little 64-page book. The size was probably 5.5 by 8.5.
Mhm.
And not only did we buy and read that book to learn how to self-publish, but we said, let's make the book look like this book. Like, why would we reinvent the wheel? We're just going to make the book. If this person could make this book, then we will make our own book as well. And that's exactly what we did. We just followed the steps of that book because for a couple of reasons. One, we didn't want to wait for a major publisher. We didn't want to do what it took to get a major publisher. And major publishers don't like short books. And the very first book we wrote, actually, before Go for No, we actually wrote another one called Unlocking the Secrets of Retail Magic, which was for retail store owners. And we knew that that book had to be short. It was 64 pages, and it was a fable like Go for No,
Mhm.
because our audience, our reader, doesn't have a lot of time. If you've ever worked in retail, kind of like working in restaurants, you're not sitting around reading very, very much. So we wanted something short and punchy, and that turned out to be one of the secrets to our success with that book, and I think with Go for No as well, because it's also very short.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, again, it makes perfect sense. It was at a time of what those of us who've been around for a while. I've been writing in some fashion since 1970, I think. And so there was a segment called vanity publishing that most people would look down on.
Mhm.
This was not vanity publishing. This was not where you were just trying to make a name for yourself or whatever. You were trying to be professional publishers of your own material that would be hitting a target market. And so, curiosity, this book sounds familiar. I may have seen the same book at about that time. Do you remember the name of the book or who wrote it, anything like that? Um,
No, I sure
yeah,
don't. I sure don't. But
and
to
I
your
can't either.
point, yeah, Don, but to your point, you were absolutely right. Vanity Press had a really negative connotation back then. And really, it was kind of like for people who, if you had the money to do it, they would publish anything. The
Hmm.
funny thing about us with self-publishing, because I feel like we were kind of breaking ground back then in that we were taking this book and making corporate America take us seriously. I mean, we had lots and lots of major corporations in this country buy tens and hundreds and thousands of copies of our books, both Go for No, this other book, many of our books,
Hmm.
and they've all been self-published. No one ever asked us, well, who's your publisher? They
Yeah.
just, and part of that is because I think that we get hung up as writers or as business owners of having to look a certain way and come across a certain way. And the people that we're solving problems for, especially in the world of writing nonfiction, where you're not just entertaining people, you are trying to offer some information, some value. People care more about their problems being solved than they care about the accolades or I mean, unless you're writing a scientific text, obviously it's kind of like, well, you want to know, like, it's been vetted, who says so, who did the green light on this.
Hmm. Hmm.
But if that's not the case, people don't seem to care.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and textbook publishing is its own market segment, of course. Even there, that can be addressed in a preface. Here's our methodology. Here's
Mm.
where it got vetted and all that sort of thing. Because I'm seeing more and more independently published textbooks these days. So, but regardless, one of the questions that I have, in a way, the genre, and I use the term loosely because if you go looking on the BISAC categories, and I'll put in the show notes, folks, those of you who don't know what BISAC is, what we even mean by that. Amazon categories, you don't find a category for business fable. And yet there are a lot of them out there. Our mutual friend, Bob Berg and John David Mann wrote several under the Go Giver. And then I can remember back in the 70s, the greatest salesman in the world, for example, so they've been around for a while. And yet, in a way, I could see them being considered kind of risky for a writer. If you're writing straight nonfiction, people know it's how to. If you're writing a story, it's for entertainment, and people know that. We're talking about using not just a story, but a good story, something that is engaging from a fiction technique standpoint. I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit. The new book, I read it through in one sitting because I wanted to know what happened. The plot was pulling me, the characters. And that's a different skill set than writing nonfiction. So that's a big way of framing the question, which is what led you to make it as a fable to begin with? Or I tend to call them parables because fables, sometimes people think they involve animals. So what led you to do a parable as opposed to just writing a straight nonfiction useful book?
Well, yeah, you're entirely right. Parable is actually the more, I think, appropriate word for sure by the classical definition. The truth is that one, we just love writing fiction. And when Richard and I met, we both had a love of screenwriting, and we've written a few screenplays together. In fact, we dabbled in Hollywood trying to get a screenplay sold in very early days of our business. And then we realized that we couldn't run around Hollywood taking meetings and getting told no over and over and also run a business.
Yeah. And that's a different kind of no, by the way, what goes on in Hollywood. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's a whole other show. And so, and so we just have a love of storytelling. And so to be able to do that and also get across our concepts in a fun way, entertaining, where people go on a little bit of an emotional journey, we wanted people to feel themselves, see themselves as the character. We thought that would do well to express these concepts. Certainly Go for No lends itself to a straight up nonfiction how to, here are the steps, here's what you should do book with absolutely no problem. And I don't think that every type of nonfiction book can be a parable, right? It's got to be the more tactical you are, the less the parable works. The more that you have kind of overarching themes. And that was tricky in Go for No because we had to weigh the story and the themes that we wanted to get across, but also kind of a couple times in the book, we have to kind of sidestep it and say, oh, and here are some actual tactics. Here is a little bit of how to. And Richard really was the lead writer on Go for No, and he did that really, really well. We didn't have as many tactics in the sequel, so we were kind of able to be a little bit more story heavy, actually, in the sequel with our characters.
Yeah. There's definitely lessons and principles there, but they're not explicitly listed. In fact, it makes me wonder. I've a couple of the books that I have out in the Sparklight Chronicles. The first one, Way of the 3-Year-Old Why, I had the 5 principles first, and then developed a story to support those principles. The second one, which is Medium Well, I had the story first and wrote the story, and then figured out what are the lessons that we could extract from that. So now for both Go for No, and we want to be sure we get to Go for No, the sequel. And by the way, folks, we're going to have links for all of these. Those of you who are on with us on video. We'll actually put a QR code up when we broadcast this, but we'll also have links in the audio. Make sure that you go to confidencecultivators.com to follow those links. But coming back to the question, Andrea, did I don't assume it's the same for both books. Did you come up with the story first and then figure out what are the lessons that come out of that? Or did you have the lessons and then you had to develop a story to support them?
So for Go for No, we definitely had the lessons first, and then we crafted the story. And then with Go for No, the sequel, we had inklings of lessons, and there was things that we wanted to cover. And the funny part is, even today, right now, like I think of things and I think, darn it, I would have put that in the book. So very frustrating. But the second one I was far more concerned on the second one with the story, because I just wasn't sure where we were going to go with that one. So it was concepts, I think, more on the first, and then the story was more prevalent in the second one.
Okay, so two things quickly before I forget one of them. I've already told you that I hung on the plot. There were things that you threw in there that they made perfect sense, but I didn't see them coming. So I think that was a great plot development. I'm wondering, and this is the second thing, I'm wondering if there's any thought, as some writers will do, just sometimes it's reader magnets, sometimes it's a prize in a contest or whatever, of some short stories that are connected. Not there may be another whole book there, I know, but just an extra chapter kind of thing. Any thought for developing those things where you said, shoot, I should have put that in there?
Don, that is a fantastic marketing idea. I'm going to use it. I love it. I didn't think of it. You're a genius.
Well, I'm taking and running with it. I can't claim credit for it, but yeah, that's.
Yeah, what a great idea. Yeah, because there are some small things where I think, I wish I could have made this point. So yeah. bonus chapters.
It's a selfish suggestion on my part, because I want to see. It's like these people, these characters that you've created, they're living beings almost. Did you find them, in fact, taking over as you wrote and going in ways that you didn't expect?
Yeah. So one of the things that Richard and I have done as a side hobby, I wouldn't call it a side hustle, because that makes it sound like we've made money at it, which we absolutely haven't. We're probably down many thousands of dollars on our fiction, on our side hustle with our fiction writing. Many $1,000s. Lots of no's on the fiction writing side. And with that, I will tell you that we absolutely have the characters who take over, and you're writing, and all of a sudden, Richard says this to me all the time. He's like, I didn't have any idea that the character would do that or say that. I mean, they completely take over. And I think that's the case. I've heard other mystery writers and thriller writers talk about that, where the characters take over. In this one, I think it's not so much, only because we have such a tight time frame and such an agenda that we're putting them on, that they don't have a long leash to really go off the deep end and do anything like what happens in fiction when you're writing a 50,000 word or 60,000 word book. And so our characters are on a shorter leash. Let's put it that way.
I like the way of putting it like that. I'm wondering then. Oh gosh, there's 2 or 3 questions trying to get out here at the same time. First of all, I stumbled across the fact that you guys had been writing fiction, I think under a pen name. And so if you want to go ahead and put out there, about the fiction, let's get it in this episode here.
Sure.
Is that okay to do that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So what's the pen name for the, are they mysteries or thrillers or?
So it's an anagram of our names, and the pen name's Deandra Archer.
Deandra Archer. Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to make sure I get that in the show notes. Deandra. And I'll make sure with you after we stop recording that I have it spelled right. Okay. And so are those books are available wherever books are sold, I would
Yeah, so that series is called Onyx Web, and the series is about a woman who we start with her back in 1903. The series spans 100 years. It's a very what I would call it is a supernatural suspense, very complex, character driven, lots of characters, incredibly complex soap opera. So
say.
when we wrote it, we envisioned it as one of these Netflix binge watch TV specials, and so that is a dream of ours. But and so you really have to be patient, and you have to like complicated. You have to like
Mm.
characters coming and going, but eventually the web of all the characters by the end makes sense. But the essence of that story is a woman who uh, it becomes a ghost, and she wants nothing more than to live. And so she figures there is kind of a code with which she can survive, and it involves taking people, a la kind of a vampire-ish type situation, and in order to live. So there's ethical considerations, but also there's a real personal development theme throughout, which is don't waste your life. Like, there are people out there who would love to be in the living and to have your problems. So, like, take action
Mm.
and enjoy and have gratitude and all of those things.
So even in the fiction, there's still a sort of teaching going on, right?
Can't help it. Can't help it.
Yeah.
It's in our
So we can see a
DNA.
pattern. Yeah, yeah. Okay, very good. I'm going to be checking those out, and folks will have links to those in the show notes as well. But coming back to the go for no thing, see, as I said, I just discovered that you all had done other writing because my initial thought was this is like Robert Cialdini, who wrote an influential book and didn't write another one for 20 years, and both of them incredibly influential. Y'all have been writing all along. So first of all, for people who haven't read either book, we want to give the log lines or the description without giving away plot, of course, which can be a little challenging when there is a sequel out there, and then to be able to say, in a way, after 25 years, why write the sequel at this point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So the first book is about a guy who wakes up in a house that belongs to, as he discovers, a wildly successful 10 years in the future version of him. And so the plot of that book is he has to figure out, like, why is he there? How does he get home? And also, what made this future him so successful? And the secret does not give it away, but the secret really is this idea of go for no, that
Mm-hmm.
you have to be willing to hear no more often if you want to get to yes. You have to be willing to fail your way to success. And so I think with the sequel, why we wanted to bring the sequel forward, a couple different reasons. One, I think we wanted to just take go for no from a different perspective. And, there's a lot of women in sales and business and entrepreneurship. So I think that that was a good thing to do, to take go for no from through the eyes of somebody else who has her own challenges. And now it's our main character's daughter in the sequel, and it's really go for no from her perspective. And also allowed us to dig in a little bit into the nooks and crannies that we weren't able to dig in with Go for No. Go for No is very, I think, much more tactical, much more kind of unemotional. Here's what you do. And this book focused a little bit more on those self-imposed limitations, and a little bit more on, I can't do it. How do I get it, but I still can't do it. Which is the thing that we've seen over the years. And I think you said it earlier, go for no is pretty simple, but it's not easy. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people struggle with it. And I think a lot of people over the years have told me, like, I've read it, I get it, still can't do it, still stuck, still have a hard time. And so this book tried to give people a little bit more encouragement, inspiration, insight into maybe how to do it without
Yeah.
coming to your house and saying, we're doing this right now. How do we do that in book form? So that was why the sequel, and it took far longer than I thought it would. I
Mm.
think even 10 years ago, we were talking like, oh, we should write a sequel. And there was always something else to do.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, that's always the case. But I think it's so insightful that on the first book, it's like, here's techniques in the sense of how to. And the second one, psychologically, here's how to, the emotional aspect. Related question, I'm fairly certain, just based on other stuff I've read, that the first one, Go for No, the salesperson there is a copier salesperson. I believe Richard was a copier salesperson. Am I right about that? Richard Fenton?
Nope, he was only in the clothing business.
Gotcha. Okay, so that, and I
Yep.
know our main character there, started in the clothing business, so
Right.
that makes sense.
Yep.
The bigger question there was, in both books, in a way, how much of y'all, because I'm from the South, that's our plural,
Yeah.
how much of y'all are in the book? I can tell you, like for Way of the 3-Year-Old Why, it's not autobiographical, but I did pull a lot of scenes out of our actual life and then develop them in fictional form. How much of that did you all do?
Yeah, that's so cool. I think so many writers do that, and we absolutely did. So there's a story in Go for No, which is kind of this classic Go for No story where our main character has this great sale, and his mentor, the district manager, asks him, "What did that customer say no to?" And he has to admit that the customer never said no to anything, and that he was the one who ended the sale. This is kind of like the famous Go for No story, and that actually happened to Richard when he was selling suits for a living and struggling. And I will say that Richard and I approach sales a little bit differently. He is not a natural salesperson at all. At least that's what he says. I think he's very natural at it, but he doesn't gravitate towards it naturally. He's definitely an introvert, and
Mhm.
he has all of the hangups and all of the stuff that our characters have, that our characters struggle with. Because we always say that we could never write Go for No, or have never written it if we were fearless, if no wasn't an issue. It would have been a totally different book. It would have been us coming from on high saying, come on, Don, you can do this. All you need to do is hear no more often.
Yeah,
It's not that hard. You suck it up, buttercup, you know?
yeah, yeah.
And instead we're like, no, we want to come down to, these are our fears. This is our hesitation. And even, um, in the sequel, we tried to pull from um, kind of what our issues are, but also we with the sequel, we were able to take this 20 plus years of experience that we've had and put all of the things that we've heard people tell us through the eyes of our main character, Cassidy. So Cassidy goes through this little exercise where she comes up with all of her self-imposed limitations. Well, those are all the big ones that we've heard from people over the years. It's the ones
Mhm.
that we hear over and over and over again. And so we were just able to put it into Cassidy's mouth. That way, the people that are reading it are like, oh, that's me.
Mhm, mhm. Did you, and I'll probe a little bit on that, whether in your life or somebody else's life, a child whose parents were very successful in business, in sales, and one of the sideways points we want to make is that if you are in business, you are in sales. I hope I'm not giving anything away in the sequel to say one of your, I'd call her a major character, although not a lead character. Um, she's a designer of golf courses, and you think of this as a creative person, that sort of thing. And she very clearly makes the point that she has to sell, or nobody's going to benefit from what she does.
Mhm.
So, coming back to the original question here, a kid who grew up benefiting from those abilities who still look at sales as being sleazy. I think that's one of the things that she said at one point. So does that come from your life or somebody that you know, or is that just a general thing that you've seen out there in the world working with people?
Yeah, so I think it certainly is. I guess it's a hang up that we certainly don't have. Although Richard, he might. I love sales. I absolutely love it as a profession, and I love being a student of great salesmanship uh, and learning to be better. I think that the thing with our main character Cassidy, who thinks that sales is sleazy, we wanted to put that into her mouth, into her perspective, because it's such a huge theme. We see it constantly with
Mm-hmm.
people who, and it's not that they necessarily are able to voice that so overtly, but you can't help but have that as the underlying like thing when there's so much distaste for it,
Mm-hmm.
and people who don't want to even say that they're in the business of selling. They want to call it something else. They want to say they do something else, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we wanted to really hit that one hard, and talk about that so that we could get over that as one of the big barriers.
Was it a challenge from a plot standpoint that Cassidy is viewing what her dad does for a living, did for a living, and she viewed it as sleazy? Does this make sense from a plot standpoint?
Yeah, and that was tricky, because uh, it took us a while to figure out what the conflict was and how we were going to solve it. And that's, you know, that's what you always want to do with a parable is, or any story, right?
Yeah.
It's, you've got to have conflict. You've got to have something that your main character has to deal with and has to overcome. Well, we knew that we wanted Cassidy to go from hating selling to liking selling or tolerating selling, and not being able to go for no to being able to go for no. And we have to accomplish that in a really, really short period of time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was tricky. And that, so the device, of course, that we came up with was Eric's love of this golf course, and he wants to restore it. And this falls in his lap. And so now there's kind of like this mission to go on, and that's our problem. That's our problem to solve. But we went back and forth and back and forth on, you know, how we were going to how we're going to do this. And then the challenge is always what we didn't want to do, which is what some parables do, which is there's no real good conflict. There's no stakes.
Yeah.
The reader is watching, listening to conversations, and they're going through the motion. They're getting the information through conversation and dialogue, but there is no conflict. There are no stakes. So you're going from chapter to chapter learning stuff through dialogue, which is fine. It's a little different, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't care about the characters, and you're not concerned for how they're going to fare or what's going to happen to them next. And that's really, I think, the real difference between a just okay parable and a parable that gets people to consume and finish the book is they've got to care. They've got to
Mm-hmm.
have that, the stakes have to be there. And so but that was hard for us, because it's like, all right, because every time we would brainstorm, I'm like, well, I don't care what's happening. If as the writer you don't care about what's happening to your character, you're in
Oh,
big trouble.
yeah, absolutely. That made me think of a question, then it got away from me. Let me see if I can get it back here. Oh, I'll come back to. Different question here, but I noticed a couple of times, both in Go for No and in Go for No, the sequel, you're using something that these days I think people would refer to as alternative universe or alternative reality. Um, in Go for No, there is a dividing point where the incident you've already mentioned in the clothing store, our starting universe, so to speak, he
Yeah.
didn't really learn from the experience. And in that 10 years in the future, he did learn from it. And that was what made the difference. Now, in 2000, I don't know how many people were talking about alternate universe. I mean, MCU has kind of made us all aware of that. So, where did the idea of were you consciously developing this idea of alternative universes?
Yes, absolutely. And the reason for that was we love supernatural
Ah,
twists.
gotcha.
Love them. And in 1999, the big movie that was out that year was a movie called The Sixth Sense. And the little boy saw ghosts and I see dead people, I think is his famous line. And in the end, spoiler alert, I'm hoping everybody has seen The Sixth Sense by now, but there's this crazy twist and your mind is kind of blown at the end where you discover that Bruce Willis at some point died and he's been a ghost this whole time. And so we just loved that idea. And so as a device, we wanted to just come up with something that was kind of supernatural nature. So it was like,
Mhm.
okay, so we did a little kind of combination of time travel, alternative universe. We were going to do a lot more in the sequel, actually, and that's where we started. And we really battled with this because we weren't sure where to go with it. So the sequel was going to have much more of a alternative universe, and but we didn't want to copy it again and have Cassidy do the same thing that our main character did. And
Yeah.
so we show a little bit of her seeing herself in the future as a through a dream, kind of a dream. But the reason we did that is we just love the supernatural twist. So every choice, every decision that we make is there's a reason behind it. I
Mm.
don't think there's really not probably. So I love your questions because nothing is like accidental. Like, oh yeah, we picked that tree because it's a tree. No, no, no. Everything that you read, whether it's a concept or a plot device or something about a character, was very intentional. And not that you sit there and battle with trying to make a decision. So it's not like there's a million decisions. It's just everything's intentional.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. I have to comment that I loved part of what you did in the sequel. That all along, the main character, whose name is escaping me right now. I hate getting older. Um,
It's
what's his name? What's his name?
Eric
Eric. Thank
Bratton.
you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Eric, all along he's written about this, and he's always insisted this wasn't a dream, and everybody else is saying, "Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
dream," and so that you have things happen in the sequel that make people look at Eric and go, "Wow, it really happened." I mean, that's part of what I love about that. So
Thank you. Well, and
yeah.
and yeah, so we leave that as kind of an open loop, Don. I mean,
Mhm.
because we really, in Go for No, if you think about it, you're left going like, okay, it sure seems like this is real because of how we do the end. It seems like this wasn't a dream. It seems like it was real. And
Mhm.
then we come back to it and again, he's like, I knew it, this was real. So without saying like yes 100%, so it leaves this air of supernatural kind of mystery kind of and I think that's like to me that's the fun part of the fiction.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In fact, a leading question here: have you found over the years that because you do a lot of training and you do a lot of speaking, and Go for No kind of underlies that. But are you finding that because you put these ideas into a parable form, that it then makes the principles more memorable? People are likely to stick with it, and maybe when they're under pressure, able to remember to actually do it.
Well, I would like to think so. I
Yeah.
would like to think so. I think kind of like one of the things I see a lot, and most of what I see, comments online, things like that, is people will say, "Oh, that was a fantastic book," and I think they say that for two reasons. One, I think they probably remember the idea of Go for No, like be persistent, don't
Mhm.
be willing to hear no, just that general idea. They may not remember anything else beyond that. And they don't really have to. If they don't remember all the tactics and all the concepts and all the little things, that's okay. We want them to just remember, don't talk yourself out of it. If in doubt, make your ask and be willing to hear no. Like that's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing though, like any great movie that you haven't seen, and let's say there, a movie in 30 years, like maybe it's Jaws, and a movie that probably everybody has seen, but it's probably been a long time. And you think
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, that was an amazing movie. You don't necessarily even remember particular scenes. You just remember how you felt watching it, which was
Yeah.
awe, and it was scary, and it was wild and distressing. And so I hope that when people report on Go for No, it's that they say it's great because the feeling that they had reading it all these years later is just a feeling like, yeah, it was really cool, it was interesting, it was different. But who knows how much actual stuff they remember.
Well, yeah, yeah, and that's hard to measure, certainly. But I have often thought that effective writing and effective speaking were more about a transfer of emotion than a transfer of ideas.
Hmm.
If you can get the emotion across, people are a little more likely, maybe not so much to remember it, but to reconstruct it for themselves. Hmm.
Yeah, that's so true. Mm.
So let me ask a couple other things that I have in mind here. For one thing, you all are in a unique position to say what has changed in sales over 25 or 30 years. And context for that, I was trained back in the 70s, and I'm not going to mention names because this is not about criticizing some of the old masters, so to speak. But there was so much of sales literature that was basically about how to back a prospect into a corner to where they you cut off all of their exits. They could not say no. And I am an introvert like Richard. I viewed stuff like that as being very stressful, and it didn't feel good on my end. I guess there were people who made a lot of money doing that. I'm not sure, but my sense of it is that generally that kind of idea in sales has been viewed as counterproductive. I'm asking a complicated question here. Am I reading too much into that? How has it changed?
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, I think the pendulum has swung slowly, and it's taken, I think, a couple of decades, but now here we are, almost to the point where sometimes I wonder if it's swung too far. So
Mhm.
we had a point where sales was very sharkish, very shark-like in that to go back to the Jaws theme, uh, where people were aggressive and you did what it took. And there's that whole idea of I don't take no for an answer,
Mhm.
which I think on the surface, people might assume that's what go for no means. Like, I don't take no for an answer. And in fact, that is not true. We absolutely are okay with no. What we're not okay with is not asking.
Yeah.
So there's that little nuance there. We don't want to beat people up to force them into yes. That's absolutely not what we want to do. So we've swung now to the point, though, I think, where people are afraid to even say the word sales. They don't want to ever look pushy. They don't, everything is, and I'm all for building relationships for sure, but everything is so where you're almost walking on eggshells. It's like there is no room for assertiveness.
Mhm.
At least to me, I feel like I'm starting to see that, and there's got to be, to me, we've got to get somewhere in the middle. So it's about communicating courageously and being able to give your customers and your prospects the psychological safety that they need to say no, but
Mhm.
to get them to say no. And unfortunately, because people were terrorized all those years by salespeople, our collective unconscious as humanity, I think, has learned salespeople are bad. They're going to badger you. They're going to force you into buying something that you don't want or need. So,
Manipulate you. Yeah.
right, manipulate you. So you better protect yourself instead of saying, let's just all learn how to be better communicators. So I think we're getting there. And now you have, of course, technology,
Mhm.
which throws all of this into this crazy blender of us learning to deal with technology, and then generations coming up now who are, we see, terrified of actual human to human contact, and certainly they're not making phone calls, and they, they have a huge adversarial relationship with selling and marketing and all of that. And so that's kind of where we are. I think um, in terms of what's happening on the sales landscape, it's going to be really interesting to see how it unfolds over the next couple of years. But I think that bottom line, making sure that you can have the courage to ask in whatever capacity is still going to be really important. And that's really where Go for No comes in. And that's what I wanted to get across more than anything with our main character Cassidy, was that she just had the courage to take action. We put her in a situation where she had to take action. She had this split-second decision to make, a couple choices actually. One, was she going to go on this trip? One, was she going to talk to this person? And in those moments, we had her say yes. And that, to me, is a huge success. And I think that's what our next kind of generations need to recognize, is you need to be willing to take those risks.
Take the risk, yeah, to risk failure. That's a great insight right there. I'm thinking there's two extremes, and it happens. I was reading some old Far Side cartoons just in the last couple of days.
Oh,
Love those, yeah,
love them. They're
yeah.
the
But
best.
the one that popped up for me, I forget what the guy's name in the cartoon was supposed to be, but like, it's like Don King, super salesman, and it showed him sailing away on a boat. He's waving, and on the shore are Alaskan natives with their igloos, and beside each igloo there is a freezer. And so that whole idea about selling stuff that people don't need
Yeah.
to them. Okay, one
Right.
extreme. At the other, even back in the
Mm.
day, if I were to name the author where I saw this, I know it's somebody that you and I both look up to as being one of the pioneers in professional speaking. And even at that time, he told the story about somebody saying, "You're not trying to sell me something, are you?" And the guy said, "Oh, no, 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 no." Well, then what are you then? A professional visitor? So there's even then there were those people who would make calls, but just not ask for the sale because they didn't want the rejection.
Mm.
So finding that sweet spot in the middle, I see, as you're saying, Go for No is to give you the psychological room to be able to hear no, and then to be able to give your prospect, and I don't even like calling them prospects, but the
Mhm.
the person that you are selling to, I don't have a problem with the word sales,
Mhm.
um, that they're not backed into a corner. They're actually more likely to say yes in that case.
Mm.
Um, and I do
Mhm.
want to also say that one of the things that impressed me most in Go for No, the sequel, is that you were very explicit. I hope I'm not giving something away here. You were very explicit in Cassidy observing her dad selling and realizing not only was he not trying to back anybody into a corner, he was trying to eliminate candidates as quickly as possible. And I think the statement in there was that effective selling is more about effective prospecting than about effective persuasion. So is that
Mhm.
something that's always been there in sales and people just have a misunderstanding about its nature, or has that actually changed over the last few years?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And I think there's definitely two schools, which is, there's the, I mean, there's so many kind of methodologies. There's the kind of challenger sale, there's the consultative seller, where you ask a ton of questions, you work on building that relationship. And on the Go for No side, we're kind of a little bit more on the quick disqualification. Let's save everybody a lot of time and energy and just try to find out, if is this worth having a
Mhm.
conversation over. And one of our I don't know if mentor is the right word, but we loved his book, and it goes back a few decades ago. It was a book called High Probability Selling by a guy named Jacques Worth. And we saw a lot of synergy between Go for No. And one of the things I loved that he would, his point was always about respecting your prospect's time, and that rapport building could start later when they were like a customer, when you were doing the other stuff, just but at the beginning, just to decide if it's worth us spending our time and our energy together to have like this conversation. We don't need to do all of that stuff, and that just always resonated with us. So we do not, from a Go for No standpoint, have a detailed step-by-step methodology. So that high probability one is kind of one that we said that resonates and aligns with what we talk about, and that's why we put that little scene in the book. But I think that whatever methodology you use, and this is something that, again, I would have put in the sequel had I been thinking straight. Whatever methodology you use, whether it's you want to do consultative type selling, you want to do the challenger sale type methodology, Sandler, high probability, you Go for No in each of them in their own ways, because at some point you need to ask the question, can we move forward? Does this make sense? What's the next step? You have to have the courage to ask the question to proceed. And so there's always room, I think, no matter, it would be like saying, any interaction you have with friends or family, at some point you're going to ask them a question that they're going to have to say yes or no to, about something. And that's where
Yeah,
Go for
yeah.
No comes
I
in.
know somebody you probably know, a friend of mine, Lois Kramer, who trains speakers. One of her great
Yeah.
questions is this a good fit? It's non-threatening, but it also clearly tests whether there's a moving forward. So excellent,
Right.
excellent. Well, I
Yeah.
told you before
Yeah.
we started recording that I kind of had a devil's advocate question to put out there. And this came from a conversation I had with somebody that has not read the book. I just put the basic idea of Go for No out there. And again, I don't think this is giving anything away. The basic idea of Go for No is, instead of tracking the number of sales that you make, figure out how many calls you need to make typically to make that number of sales, and then start tracking your no's. And when I said this to him, he said, "Oh, that doesn't make it." And it's not just he wanted to focus on the yeses. It's like, if that becomes my goal, all I have to do to get the number of no's I need for the week is to call people that I know are not a good fit, and then I can quit on Monday afternoon. And what occurred to me is, I think that's coming out of a mindset of, I'm a salesperson working for a sales manager who is pushing this Go for No thing. And so what the manager is tracking is how many no's that you get. And he's just thinking, okay, I can turn in my little spreadsheet and I got my 25 no's. See ya. And so, just to address the idea, I think the underlying implication was this is a gimmick. And I know it's not, okay, but I want,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Right. Yeah, I completely. And I think that if you were, I mean, first of all, if you were going to use Go for No as a gimmick to undermine your sales manager, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, right? So ultimately, you're going to harm yourself if you say, you know what, my sales manager wants me to get 25 no's. I'm just gonna call. I'm just gonna do a horrible job, get my nose, and then move on. Well, no, obviously we don't want to do that. And in fact, one of the things I always say is, we're not hoping, wishing, praying to get a no. You don't want to, and I certainly think that your mindset, your expectation plays a role in how you come across, right? So if you expect, wow, I'm gonna fail, I'm gonna botch this, I'm gonna fall right on my face, that would probably be a bad strategy. So we don't want to have people expect to get a no or do a bad job just to fail for failure's sake. That would be silly and
yeah.
counterproductive, right? So on the surface, I get it. I get the argument, And but obviously that just makes no sense, because no one, we couldn't run a business that way. Because we've got 10,000 people that have done nothing but fail. We have no record of achievement, and yet still people pay us. How is this possible? It would be quite a magic trick, actually, to pull that off. So really what it comes down to is, it's not about expecting the no and doing a bad job. It's about accepting no as part of the process. And we come at it from an idea that you have fear of rejection, you have fear of failure, you care what somebody thinks about you, you've got all these psychological things, some real, some imagined, doesn't matter. All of these are the fact is, they're issues. And so what we want people to do is to learn how to move through their discomfort, get that no if it is in fact a no, learn to accept it, learn to value it, learn to perhaps deal with it, and even push back a little. And there are ways to deal with those no's. Some sales trainers are excellent at how you manage that no, and can you turn it into a yes. We don't go down that path as much. I think there's definitely, there's for sure opportunity to do that, or at least keep the door. I'm a big fan of, keep the door open, right? If you get that no. So but the whole idea is to not have people avoid no, to not have people shut themselves down because they think, I'm not going to call, they're just going to tell me no. I'm not going to ask them if they want XYZ additional product because they're just going to tell me no. I'm going to sit here. I'm not going to ask anybody if they want to have me on their podcast. I'm just going to sit and hope that people invite me on their podcasts, because I don't want to go out and ask, if I can be interviewed. Like, my business would be dead, right? If I didn't go out there and, hey, I want to be on your show, and I'd like to, can you interview me, and all of these things. So it all comes down to the courage.
Yeah. That is so simple and yet so profound. It's one of the reasons I wanted to get that out there. Okay, so I want to be respectful of your time as we're drawing to a close here. I have two more questions for you. One, I'm thinking back to a time when I was working in radio back in I think I was early 80s, so it was well before modern technology. We had an engineer at the radio station who was just brilliant. I mean, in terms of invention, I think if I asked him to build me a time machine, he would have gone down to Radio Shack and bought $5 worth of parts and built one. Wouldn't write any of it down. He would never want to do it again. He was just that kind of creative. And so he could never sell any of his stuff. He just gave away some of the gadgets that he made. He died in the 1990s. So this is a hypothetical question, but I'm wondering, would he be more likely to be able to, as a solopreneur, my sense of it is solopreneuring is a little easier these days. What gets most in the way of brilliant people selling effectively? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so true. Well, certainly they're just simply the logistical, tactical things that get in the way, right? A huge part of sales is being able to reach your customer. And I mean, I will tell you that from 2000 to 2007, we didn't sell go for no. We sold a fair amount of books, but our books didn't explode until 2007, when we got on Amazon and actually had distribution as a self-published author. Amazon changed the game for, as you know,
Yes.
all of us to be able to. So from that standpoint, I think the solopreneur, the entrepreneur today, with the platforms that we have to be able to deliver content and information and all of these things, and even just shipping and manufacturing and all of the things that you've seen, I would say over the last 15 years for sure, right? From 2010 to now, just an explosion of people being entrepreneurs, because the logistics and the infrastructure is all there. So it made doing things back then very difficult. Having said that, though, so it doesn't seem to matter, even with all of the gadgets and all of the things and the cameras and everything we have today, mindset is
Mm.
still a huge factor. And caring what people think and what it looks like and being perfect are still some of the biggest hangups that people have, regardless of they think it's infrastructure, they think it's logistics, they think it's tactics, but it's mindset. And I so these days, I think if anybody is ever held back by anything, it is strictly mindset, because all of the other stuff has been handled. All of the other issues that we had 20 years ago of why somebody couldn't do something. I mean, if somebody had come up with a cool business idea, where could you go? QVC. It was like you had to go to somebody who could help you do it. Shark Tank. That's why Shark Tank is so popular and so cool, because they do all of that for you. And now we don't, I mean, anybody can almost sell anything, and yet they don't. And the question is why, and that comes back to
All
mindset.
the excuses are gone, it sounds like.
All
Oh,
the excuses are gone, especially
yeah.
Don writing. I mean, with publishing on demand now, it's just anybody can be an author. If you want to have a book, having a book is
Yeah,
just
yeah.
not a
Finding
problem.
the audience for the book, that becomes the challenge. But yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
fair.
Excellent. Well,
Yes,
before I
fair.
get to my last question, let's make sure people know how to find you. Now, we've got folks who are on here audio only. So but it's easy to say your website name. It is go4no.com. Okay. So it's just like it sounds, people. No spaces, no underscores, GOFORNO.com. And then I also have, for folks who are on here with us visually, you can connect with Andrea on LinkedIn. A real quick question, Andrea, since you and your husband, Richard Fenton, wrote the book together, how is it that you wound up with Go for No for your LinkedIn and he had to do his own?
Because Richard is not a fan
Gotcha.
of social media. So I hijacked the brand and do all the
That is
social
so
media.
smart. That is so smart. And I've even got a QR code here, folks. So those of you who are on with us visually, you can find Andrea on LinkedIn. Just shoot your screen there. Not literally, you understand. Okay. But yeah, that'll make it simple to connect with her. Is there any place else that we would want to share a link to, Andrea, that you would like for people to know?
No, I think people should go to goforno.com because they can take the no quotient quiz, find out what their no quotient score is. It's definitely the
Okay,
best
okay,
place
and
to
you can
start.
sign up for your newsletter there because I get your noteworthy. Is that what you call it every week? Notivation. There we go.
Motivation, the
Yeah, yeah.
motivation.
So that's a great resource that comes
Yeah.
every week if you would like to do that. So the question I like to wind up with is I'm always a generalist talking to a specialist in some way, and so there may be something that you wish that I had asked that I didn't ask. What would that question be, and what would your answer to that be?
Oh my gosh. Probably something probably something related to writing or publishing, or gosh,
Which I
let
tend
me
to do
think.
too much of that
Oh
in my view, because I'm such a writing nerd, that I just love looking at that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, and I am too, and yeah, such a geek over publishing and all of the business behind publishing and all of that. So, um, yeah, I
Maybe what's
guess
next? I want you to answer the question however you want to, but it does call up. We've
yeah.
talked a little bit about short stories here. You're continuing your fiction writing. What do you have planned as a writer?
Yeah, so the fiction writing was from the bulk of it was we wrote a 10 book 2000 page episodic 10 book series from 2014 to 2017. Almost collapsed our business because we we spent so much time, effort, energy, and money on that, and we loved it. And Go for No helped fund that. And so, if anybody, I think what's kind of funny is I'll just share this. If anybody sees successful people out there who they assume like, oh, they're successful, they have this thing, they have this brand or this business or whatever. I can assure you that we fail at stuff all the time. We're always trying things. People who are entrepreneurs, people who are watching this who do more than one thing, you get your head turned. Richard also likes to paint. Those are his paintings behind me. And so he's constantly painting and putting artwork all over the house. So our walls are getting filled, but we're always failing. We always have failures. So I guess I'll just leave people with the idea that we walk the talk, right? We fail our way to success. Most of what we try doesn't work. Every now and then, a couple things work, thank God.
Absolutely.
So there's
if you're going to uncover the diamonds, you have to move a lot of dirt. All righty. Well,
exactly.
This has gone longer than our typical episode, but I am so fanboying myself here, Andrea, and love the opportunity to dig into these ideas with you. And on behalf of our listeners, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having you here on the show. So look forward to seeing what comes out next in the Go for No universe or whatever else it is you all produce.
Thank you, Don. It was so much fun.
Well, that was a fantastic conversation. Even though it was recorded a couple of months ago at least, it's still very much current. And I've read the sequel a couple of times now. I just really love how the story all flows together. And I love the reminder about no. Learning to deal with it, actually. I had a friend who said that he didn't think that it was a very good concept because then you could just say, well, if what I'm tracking is how many no's I get, well, I'm just going to mess it up on purpose then. And that's not what she's going for there. You know, I think even though there have been some people who've actually tried that, one of the things that they have found is that if you just ask, you're actually more likely to get somebody to do what you're asking. This is not about manipulation. It's about making sure that you don't let the dread of no stop you from even asking. And so I hope that you will find that to be useful and encouraging to you. So as we're wrapping up here, need to remind you that you can support the show if you would like by going to buymeacoffee.com/Don King. That's DONNKING. Best way, of course, to support the show, however you want to do it, is to subscribe at thealignmentshow.com. You can subscribe for free, share that with your friends and family. You can upgrade for additional benefits to you as well as a way of supporting the show. However you upgrade like that, we'll make sure that you get access to those additional benefits. But mainly, we would invite you to share it with a friend. There's somebody that you know who could benefit from the encouragement that comes from the Alignment Show. Also, I work with a limited number of people to help them bring their books into publication. I'm working with, I think it's 5 authors right now, which is pretty much my limit for the moment. But we're helping people to take advantage of the benefits of independent publishing. So if you would like to reach out and talk with me about that, you can send an email to Don, that's DONN, at donking.com. And I'll be glad to talk with you further about that. In any case, look forward to our next episode. I'm not quite sure who's going to be on with us next, but we will have more with The Alignment Show, helping you to live your values and value your life. That's a wrap for this episode of The Alignment Show. What's your next step? Whatever came up for you, take action. Talk it out with a friend or just sit with it for a moment. And if this episode sparked something meaningful, share it with someone you care about. You can subscribe and find all past episodes at thealignmentshow.com. And be sure to follow or leave a review wherever you heard or watched this. It really helps more folks find the show. We'll be back soon with another thoughtful conversation. Until then, live your values and value your life.